Oh, that would be cool. That would be nice. Yeah. All right. Yes. So the questions that I'm going to ask you are basically related to the UK space sector, but with a focus on technology transfer and incubation. So those three main things. Could you give me a bit of information about yourself? I mean, I went through your LinkedIn and everything, but I think hearing it from the horse's mouth is better, right?
Okay. Um, so I'm currently head of space at Innovate UK, and Innovate UK is the innovation agency of the UK government. I actually started out in a completely different career in the maritime and satellite navigation sectors. Was a very early user of GPS and satellite communications in maritime environments. Got used to commercializing those technologies. Was involved in the Galileo PPP negotiations as part of the bailout deals.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, I thought I wanted a new challenge, so I entered government and took on this job at Innovate UK 6-7 years ago now.
Okay. What is your job exactly? Like, could you explain to me like what is your job description?
Okay. So as head of space, I have a small team of 7 people.
Mm-hmm.
Our primary job is looking across the specific activities in the space sector, identifying which ones have the highest growth potential economically and within the competency of the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and then design a program of support around the growth opportunity, economic growth opportunity, rather than necessarily the technology base. So we then choose a variety of different tools to use in that. It could be setting up a knowledge transfer network, it could be setting up a catapult, it could be simple funding, or it could be more exotic business intervention tools like launch pads, entrepreneur missions, or just simply creating working groups and creating a forum for discussion, which is kind of what we do with the KTN, but sometimes we do a more targeted activity.
Mm-hmm.
We also look after the national contact point for the Horizon 2020 space program. That's Catherine Holt, and she's fully integrated into my team now. But we also have responsibilities looking after the UK Space Agency's commercial interests, particularly in navigation and telecommunications. So we look after half the navigation programme and all of the telecoms programme on behalf of the UK Space Agency. There is an extension of that where we are, and myself personally, are quite involved in the ESABIC in Harwell.
Okay. All right. So what is the governance structure regarding the space sector in the UK?
So it's useful to take a little bit of a historical perspective over the last 5 years, or 7 years now. And 7 years ago, we had the British National Space Centre, which was a loose association of 9 different government departments who had an interest in the space sector. And it was really just a policy unit, but and an aggregator of interest for the European Space Agency. Then in 2009, something happened called the Innovation Growth Team, where about 100 people spent a year looking at the space sector. They came from backgrounds in government, in industry, in academia, and said, actually, what are the opportunities over the next 20 years, and what does the UK need to do to be ready for that?
Yeah.
And one of the primary recommendations that was immediately acted on was the creation of the UK Space Agency. So they own the UK space policy and strategy, specifically for civil activities, but some defence activities as well. And they control the majority of the budget. But they then work with various partners, including Innovate UK, the Science and Technology Facilities Council, 3 or 4 different research bodies within the research community, and about 19 different government departments.
Wow.
So they still coordinate that interest. Sometimes it's just making sure that policies are aligned. and sometimes it's about technology demonstration, so saying to, I don't know, the Department for Transport about what role does space have in road, rail, maritime, and so forth. They also have, so that's sort of the governance structure, and the funding kind of follows the governance structure. But Innovate UK, we have our own budget. It's outside of the science budget. The Space Agency is part of the science budget, so we invest purely on economic terms rather than on a broader research agenda.
Okay. But then if I would have to envision the UK governance structure, let's say through an image or an organogram, where does Innovate UK stand? Is it parallel to the UK agency, or because Innovate UK is a subdivision of the government, right? Specifically aimed for space.
Not specifically looking at space. We're active in about 20 different technology areas or market areas, and space is about 7% of what we do.
Okay.
So if you were looking at an organogram, you'd have central government, head of cabinet office, and then the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, or BIS. And both Innovate UK and UK Space Agency are elements of BIS.
Okay.
We both sit under BIS. It gets into complicated governance. The Space Agency is an executive agency, and we're a non-departmental government body. So, but effectively, in terms of structure, we're at the same level.
Okay, wonderful. Now, why do you think that the space sector is organized the way that it is right now?
Internationally, within Europe, or within the UK?
Within the UK. I think because the UK is so dynamic, I think we should really keep it strictly to the UK, so all relations within.
Okay. Well, a lot of it comes back to this IGS I was talking about earlier. And what triggered the IGS was something called the Case for Space, which was a full economic impact assessment of the space sector in the UK. And that's included everything from direct investments, the science programs, technology transfer activities, and commercial activity. And that really gave the figures to make the case for the space sector, that's the name, which kind of explained where the financial opportunities were, and that we had a relatively mature telecoms market, we had an emerging navigation market at the time, and Earth observation industry that was still very much in a research base, but had very high growth potential. And that then drove a change in attitude about how this should be governed. And the UK Space Agency is owning the policy and the regulation. We then saw a policy document come up, be updated, and that created a more balanced portfolio about, okay, how much are we going to spend on an astronaut? How much are we going to spend on a mission to Mars? How much are we going to spend on the telecom sector? How much are we going to spend on pulling other customers through to use new services from space? So we ended up with a very different investment portfolio, effectively, an ambition, and that's then driven the sort of the structure and the strategy. So, for example, the Space Agency has a very clear science agenda, but they've chosen to partner with us on the more commercial areas where they don't have the skill base, where we recruit from industry. So everyone in Innovate UK is somebody who's made money in their sector rather than the civil servant used to writing policy for the sector.
Yeah. Okay, and do you think the way the UK space governance structure is structured influences the amount of entrepreneurship and innovation within the sector?
Yes, but probably indirectly. I think what has happened in the UK in quite a big way through all of the different initiatives is really raising the profile of space, and especially the flight to Tim Peake has made people think a lot more about space, and we've seen lots of TV programs on the BBC, particularly looking at what the space really mean for me. So it's triggered a huge media interest, effectively. And that has a knock-on effect that people start thinking about, actually, this is a high-growth market. How do I become part of this? How do I engage in this? Mm-hmm. So the entrepreneurs are always looking for the next opportunity. And those people who have associated themselves with the various technologies, such as particularly location services, but in all areas, suddenly realise, there is a space agency in the UK. Who knew? and that becomes a gateway for support. In the same way, we've raised the profile in our communities through the KTNs and the catapults, so people understand the opportunities. But also, there's other initiatives like the Satellite Finance Network, which we support, which is really about engaging into the investment community, which is obviously quite strong in London, to say, actually, this is a sector with high growth history and high growth potential. Why wouldn't you want to be investing in this area? So we bring together the support mechanisms, which is not just money, the money, and the entrepreneurial community to say, right, what do you want to do? Let's make this happen. And the entrepreneurial community is a mixture of people within the space sector already who are perhaps frustrated in a more traditional career, and they need a lot of help about how to set up a business and run and prepare for growth, versus more serial entrepreneur type characters who know what they're doing. They just need access to the technology base and the right sort of people to recruit for their companies.
Okay, so then, all right, well. So, taking on that train of thought, what is the ultimate goal of the government policy for the space sector? I mean, I know about the IGS and that you guys want to achieve 40 billion or so by 2030, but how does the cooperation with ESA help achieve these goals?
Okay, well, so there's the first point about what is the goal. And the unwritten statement is it's about delivering economic growth. The whole argument to date has been about this is a high growth sector, this is a highly valuable sector, Britain's sort of hidden gem, as it were, and that's why there is political support. And then the role of ESA within all of this, at different levels, is about being able to deliver these programs. Mm-hmm. And we're, to be speaking openly, we are sometimes at odds with ESA. We sometimes disagree about the best approach, because ESA has some very rigid rules that are common across all programs. And when you're dealing with rapid growth, you need to be a little bit more flexible and sometimes correct your course. But the majority of the technology programs and the majority of the budget in the UK is invested into ESA, and the balance is reflected in that between the different sectors is pretty much reflected in national activities from the UK Space Agency budget as it is in the ESA budget. Very much ESA is the vehicle for delivery.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For the entrepreneurial side, and I'll add into that the application side, we've worked with the ESA TIA team, Telecoms and Integrated Applications, and the creation of the ESA IAP program, if you know that. Mm-hmm. So the UK has been a huge supporter and subscriber to that, and really tried to form that program, and we're continually. It's a process of continual improvement, really. Mm-hmm. and sort of the ultimate success in that was the creation of the UK ESA Centre at EXAT, where we're really trying to share that know-how and philosophy within Europe.
Okay, so then, well, it kind of answered my next question, which was, how does your institution engage in entrepreneurship and innovation policy creation? But you already answered that. So, all right. Do you think that there is a clear increase in technology transfer between the UK space sector and private companies?
I wouldn't say in the pure technology, in the traditional technology transfer sense, we've seen a huge increase. But I put a distinction between technology transfer and satellite applications.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends how you're defining activity. So we've very much gone on to say, right, we have this satellite infrastructure. It might be a navigation capability, it might be a communications capability, it might be Earth observation capabilities. Who are the users of those systems, and what do they need to improve their access?
Mm-hmm.
So for navigation, it's access to people who understand the signal and some testing labs, but it's very much an engineering-led engagement. The service is free. For telecommunications, there are plenty of suppliers out there. The challenges are mostly market-orientated and mostly to do with price.
Mm-hmm.
But that also gives you an indication of what the next technologies are needed, are going to be. And Earth observation is really a data access point. There's some data that's free from international sources. There's also commercial data that's very expensive. So there's quite a high cost barrier to find your right tech, the right service to build into whatever it is that you're going to be doing with that tech, with that data at the other end. It's really a big data challenge. For the pure technology transfer piece, that's sort of a little bit, and the sorts of things we see in the Harwell ESA Business Incubator program are more sort of hardware capabilities and technologies that have been developed, or IP, and transferring that into other markets. So it's more sort of hardware rather than software, which is
across markets.
And then it depends, it's open to what those markets might be. Okay.
Because actually I should have started with the question, how do you define technology and how do you define technology transfer? I mean, for everybody it's different, it's very contextual. What is your idea on that?
It is very, very different. I think in the pure sense, the technology, I've never really answered it as what is technology. The technology base is really where there's a piece of research or development work which has created a new capability or product that is addressing a specific challenge. The technology transfer piece is where you then take that capability, that solution, that technique, and apply it into another area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I thought you got stuck.
Okay. No, sorry. I just stopped moving and talking at the same time.
I was like freezing. Okay, well, we're just going to continue on all the questions based on your definitions. So, feel free to just to think only about technology transfer in your own context. So it doesn't really have to be Innovate UK or job related, just your very own. How successful would you say that the ESA BIC in Harwell is in technology transfer?
I'd say moderately successful. Looking over I think 60 companies that have been incubated there, there are half a dozen examples that have really then grown on to become something very big and something special. The success ratio of the other companies has been moderate. few have reached a turnover of, let's say, £1 million as a benchmark, or €1 million as a benchmark. And most of them have been through multiple support mechanisms. So some of them have been through other business incubation programs or received other funding from Innovate UK, or they've done something else as well as just going through the ESA-BIC. And that's a positive thing. It's about the community pulling together and finding the right solutions for a company to grow.
And what do you, if I ask you the same question about SA Catapult, that's right across ESA-BIC, what would you say?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If I would ask you the same question, so how successful would you say the SA Catapult is in Harwell in technology transfer? What would you say?
Okay. Well, the SASAPS Catapult doesn't have an explicit role in technology transfer. And they're not there to specifically incubate companies. The activity they do in technology transfer, or more specifically knowledge transfer, is sort of an earlier stage. It's about introducing the communities together, reaching out to a lot more people, saying, have you thought about this? And then building the ideas into something that might be taken forward. And at the point where they finish the conversation with a satellite applications catapult, they might enter the ESA-BIC for a year's intensive mentoring and support and financial assistance. And they might continue the relationship with the catapult, particularly if there's some sort of data access or lab access requirement. But I see them as addressing different parts of the problem.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So, for example, we had a company looking at using Earth observation data for monitoring landfill sites, for example. So they wanted to be able to identify what might be in them, what the size of them was, whether it's worth ultimately revisiting them to extract some recyclable materials. That's a very complicated business to get your head round, and you need some very specific capabilities as to what data is available from space, what instrumentation might be able to detect. So it's very much using the instruments and the capabilities for a different use. So there's a technology transfer piece there and a complicated business challenge. The ESA-BIC is the right place to do that, whereas accessing and storing and processing large amounts of data is not something you want to do on a laptop. You need the labs and the facility to download that data, play with it, process it. And you could use Amazon Cloud Services, or you could use a university, but having the facility next door as a dedicated resource with people who know how to use that is a great relationship.
Okay. All right. Well, you see, the thing is that I'm trying to understand more about the catapult is because they seem a little bit vague to me. So even from the website, I mean, I spoke to the CEO, and now I have an overview of what they actually really do, but it seems that a lot of other people are also kind of unaware with what the catapult does and how it does it and what its goals are. So if you could help me with specifically more information about catapult would be great, because I've already had so many comments and insights of ESA side and ESA-BIC, which I think is also good but I'm really focusing on catapult. I want to learn a little bit more about them, because I've come to understand that they don't really do incubation, but they do sprints. So the firms come in with a problem. They usually, I mean, contrary to what you said, they told me that they usually take in later stage ventures. So they usually take later stage ventures, and they come for sprints or for like 1-2 days or a week, but they can come multiple times for business support.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's the other end of the process. So I'll explain a bit about what the catapults are and how that's manifested in satellite applications.
Okay.
But also a little bit about what really how the satellite applications catapult fits into the landscape as it stands.
Yeah.
So catapults are effectively almost a franchise from Innovate UK.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very specific governance model, a common set of key performance indicators that are very general that we set, and we look at each sector as a whole and identify, is this a sector that a catapult is the right fit? Because traditionally the government intervention in markets is just to put money in.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly well structured money necessarily. It's quite often grants, and it's simply, okay, you said you're going to do this, here's some money to do it. What we've done with the catapult centres is it's more about access to facilities and know-how. So our first catapult was in high-value manufacturing, for example, and contextually that's quite easy to understand because we made sure they had the latest carbon fibre weaving capabilities, the latest access to kilns for the latest ceramic and novel materials, access to 3D printing, and really keeping those resources at the cutting edge.
Yeah.
And then making those available to people. Not for free, they'd have to pay to use them, but if you wanted to use them, then you could come in and say, right, I need to figure out how to make this part, and someone who knew exactly what to do would be able to help you on effectively a non-competitive basis. So there are suppliers that would be able to do that, but going into somebody saying, oh yeah, no, you can make that part, but forget about 3D printing, you need to go and use this ceramic material, or find the best solution for them, not sell a specific product. When we looked at the space sector, we saw a big gulf between our academic capabilities, where there were an awful lot of research undertaking, and a relatively small industry base that was well geared, particularly to the ESA market or established telecommunications market. But to unlock this growth potential in the applications that have been identified, we needed access to more resources and capabilities. And there was a facility that already existed called ISIC, which we based the catapult upon. Originally, there were parallel activities, but we merged them.
Oh, really?
So some of the facilities the catapult has seems slightly at odds to their core agenda, but where we did invest in making the sort of particularly boosting the telecoms lab and the navigation capabilities to say, right, well, actually what we need is not just access to a couple of data modems, but we actually need access to the satellite, access to the dishes. So if you want to build a SATCOM device, you can access multiple service providers, multiple antennas, multiple terminals. You can find the right hardware solution in a day or two, rather than having to design something from scratch or deal with lots and lots of different suppliers. The original centre had been set up particularly to serve the Earth observation community, and really what we did was open that up and invest and expand that facility, so it was more than just a token gesture.
Yeah.
But then have a satellite control facility there to take ideas to the extreme. Or actually, I know I want to do this as a new space application, but the infrastructure doesn't exist today to do that, so I need new infrastructure. And that rings a very strong chord with the whole new space or space 2.0 generation, who are quite often coming in, looking at all this and say, right, I need a CubeSat to fix this problem.
Now it's 4.0.
We seem to have skipped 3 rather quickly. But it really was sort of initially it didn't really strike a chord with us in the UK back in 2010, 2011 when people first started talking about this. But then we quickly realised that actually it was the same end market and the same end goals. It was just a different approach to get there. And so we're now quite well engaged with that community in California.
Oh, nice. Yes, I heard Andy told me about you guys taking, I think it was a group of 9 or so to Silicon Valley for investment and or to learn how to pitch or something, right? I'm trying to recall exactly what he said.
Okay. If you look on social media on Twitter to the handle Space Mission UK.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have any other. I only have Facebook and Skype.
Okay, we've got some stuff on Facebook as well. I'll send you a link. But this was a model that was developed outside the space sector but worked very well for the space sector, whereby we do a lot of reconnaissance work and say, right, who are the people that are really forming this sector? Who are the people investing in this sector? And then take a group of 10 entrepreneurs and spend a lot of time with them refining their pitch and their ask, which is normally for investment, and then take them using the credibility that we've established and promising a high quality to meet investors, meet the right people in NASA, meet the right people in different universities. And it's very different from a traditional trade mission, which is, here are the main players, and everyone goes and has a lunch with them and a tour around the facility and a few conversations in the sidelines. These are much more targeted at the points of change. And we go at it from an investment point or investor community. And we raise a few million, and that's great. But also it's the relationships that are started. And they say, I've got some money in this other venture. You should go and talk to them. And when you get an introduction from the investor, you get a meeting the next day. Yeah. If you just ring up and talk to them, they go, well, give us a shout next time you're in the States. And it takes a lot longer. So it's really a fast track into a sector that's about building partnerships, not looking to boost exports.
And how does ESA, Catapult, and Innovate UK partner up?
So Catapult is a Innovate UK mechanism. So we pay them a grant every year. We approve a 5-year business plan, and we align a delivery plan every year.
Okay.
So we will quite often work with the Catapult, particularly when we're trying to engage communities or explore a new technology area. But the Catapult's then free to work with any of the companies that we engage with on a private basis and come to us to bid for money. So if they're also a grant recipient in 2 ways, effectively, or to go to other people where are the right source of assistance for the company they're partnering with. European Space Agency is for the majority is about investing in technologies that are either specific to the European Space Agency's missions or against the European Technology Plan. So if you're not traditionally fitting in the mold, it's quite difficult to work at any sort of scale with ESA. But the work we do as the delegates to the ARTES program for telecommunications and to navigation is to look at what ESA's doing, and then we look and we try to make that work. But we also look at what do we need to do to help companies through that. So if someone's coming into the space sector, then A manufacturer, for example, will say, right, well, actually, yeah, you do need to work. You can do bid for this work with ESA, but you might want to partner with somebody, and it might be the Catapult, or it might be another company we know to help them get space qualified and understand what they're doing. For someone taking data, one of the applications to companies I was talking about before, they might come to Innovate UK, we might fund them, or we might refer them to the Catapult, or we might refund them to ESA, particularly the IAP program. In most cases, it's a three-way referral to say, okay, this is a really interesting project. Do you know that data is already available from ESA, or that data is already available from the Catapult? And then we form the project around that activity. So it's not standing in isolation. It's pulling everything together to find the best fit for the company, not the best fit for the program.
It's a good synergy.
Very much so.
Okay, so we've already discussed how you view how successful ESA and Catapult are in technology transfer. But if we take that on another note about incubation itself, I mean, I do understand that Catapult is not an incubator, but in the same context of incubation, these general questions that I'm going to ask you are to find out what their models are exactly. So if I would ask you what the barriers are to get involved in incubation, then I really do mean ESA and Catapult. What would you say?
So the first barrier that everyone comes to us, that presents to us is money. I'm struggling to raise the money that I need, and so I need public money because I can't get any private money. And whether it's an early stage or a late stage incubation activity, or where they are in their business growth, it's always about access to money. Interestingly enough, for the more entrepreneurial types of people, access to money is not so difficult because they have a proven track record. They know how to ask for money. They know how to articulate their idea. They know how to build a team. And so what we can do within the ESABIC is address that barrier by helping people over a period of a year to really construct their company, to recruit the right people in, to get their business case really refined in parallel with their technology development. And most are developing some sort of technology, and the primary ESABIC activity is about validating that technology. What the Catapult does through the sprint activities is there's different types of sprints you can do, but very much that process is about, in the first instance, having a conversation and validating with somebody else this is a good idea, and then helping that person or that business to be very good at articulating what it is that they want to do, what they think the potential is, and a very clear ask as to how they're going to get there. If you stand up in front of an investor and say, does anyone want to give me any money? The answer is going to be, well, no. And someone says, well, right, I need 5 million, and with your 5 million, I'm going to recruit these other people. Here are the people I've already got. We know our gap is this. We need to get to the market. We know the market is X. This is our element within it. Form an orderly queue in front of me to sign up term sheets. If you're really clear and succinct in what you want, what you've got, and where you're trying to get to, people are interested. If you've just got, I've got an interesting technology that's going to change the world, why wouldn't you invest? You're going to have a longer battle. So that's where the exposure to friendly or not so friendly people to really help you form your company is quite important. Catapult helps through networking in these specific classes and the sprints. The BIC is a slightly longer term game where you have a year or two to really bottom out your technology, prove your case, and be ready to take it to and be clear in what you're asking for.
And what is the average I want to say incubatee, but the average customer turnover of the Catapult a year?
How big are the companies that work with the Catapult?
No, how many companies do they help throughout the year, on average?
So the number of companies that they have an interaction with,
yes,
is somewhere in the order of 200 to 300 a year.
Is that including the multiple times or just the number of companies?
Just the number of companies.
Okay.
And some of those conversations are just that. They're okay. What are you trying to do? A lot of people go there asking for money. They go, oh, here's a 10 million a year investment from government. I want some of that 10 million to do this. And so those are very short conversations normally. And they normally end up back with me. The other conversations are sort of, okay, we see where you're trying to go. We think this is exciting. So we can help you by working with you on this project and putting this bid into ESA or national programs or somewhere else. We can help you articulate your case, and we can introduce you to some people. So there's some great networking events or just great address books where they can say, oh, right, you need to go talk to these folks. There is business hosting activities so that they can set up a virtual or permanent office within the Catapult temporarily to get their project or their company going. So all the way up to someone like the Pew Charitable Trust, who had a massive multi-year engagement of developing an entirely new product and challenging it, entering a huge different societal area. So it's quite, it's like very much like a sales funnel, that you have lots of prospects and you filter that quite quickly, and then you come down to a certain number of companies that you can really start a project with, or just support a project, down to those where you've got a really tight, permanent commercial relationship where it's saying, okay, you're trying to achieve that, we can help you with that, and it becomes a more confidential commercial relationship.
Okay, so then if I would ask you, to what extent do you feel that existing companies in the industry, inside and outside the space sector, are aligned with the way of working within the space community in general and ESA in specific? What would you say?
So I'd say the traditional space sector in the UK is very well aligned with ESA. The majority of companies are taking between a third and a half of their activity through ESA programs. But that is a very specific way of working. It's designed around a mentality for very high-risk space missions. So you have an awful lot of technical project control. So a lot of reviews, a lot of discussions, a lot of process, which is expected to be followed to provide a very strong quality audit trail that is actually double-checked to make sure that nothing's going to fail. That's great for space hardware, but when you start looking at other markets, it becomes quite different. You actually want to start taking some risk. You want to look at some things and say, okay, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but let's try, and not kill it with process and say, okay, it took me a week to knock together this prototype web portal for looking at this data, and then 4 weeks to fill in the paperwork and the technical audit that followed.
Yeah.
So that's where there's a huge culture clash between the space sector and the rest of the world. Is the space sector works to a very high technical quality standard at all cost, whereas other sectors work to lower technical standards, but perhaps more tightly to a project management philosophy of delivering on time and on budget. quite often where we see manufacturers who want to move into the space sector, we have to sort of really sit down with them and have a look at their business plan and say, yes, you can modify your gyro or your solar panel for the space sector, but that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you are going to sell maybe 10 a year. You'll get a margin on that, you'll get a price for that reflects how much effort you put into developing your equipment to get space qualified, but don't expect to make a very high margin on that because your R&D costs and your engineering costs for each and every solution are going to be much, much higher than you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of companies move on from that point, but most technology transfer is coming out of the space sector, or stuff that's brought into the space sector is from a space company that understands that risk and those challenges. So SSTL, for example, satellites use the control system from cars called the CAN bus for controlling their satellites. So they said, well, if it's good enough to deploy an airbag in time if you crash your car, it's probably good enough to run a satellite. They've taken copied manufacturing techniques from other sectors as well, mm-hmm. Which in the first instance aren't space compliant, but to traditional space standards, but they're a lot cheaper and a lot faster. Helping companies move out of the space sector, selling their capabilities, they tend to be very, very expensive, and so you've got to start a spin-out activity quite early on in the technology transfer process so that there's someone geared to their end market, not to the origin of their technology.
Yeah.
So there is quite an important role for people who understand both sides of the equation to help companies in a technology transfer case, and the ESA-BICs are a good model of that. But also the catapult in just the guiding people through that change is important.
Okay. Well, I agree with you with most of it. I mean, I already knew some parts I did not know. So it's very interesting to listen to you, to explain it to me so easily, you know? It really is. You make it sound so easy, like, no? You make it sound really, really easy. It's nice. It's very nice. So
reflect it after this afternoon, and you've probably forgotten half of what I said, but I will send a recording to you.
No. I have it recorded. I need to have it recorded, of course, because I think I have to do between 15 and 20 interviews. So you can never ever remember everything. You must record. You must. Okay. So then that one question that I asked you had actually 2 sub-questions, which is, I think you already answered, which were, how easy is it to translate space technology to private companies? You've already answered that. And is there a special process involved? You already answered that one as well. To me, is there something that you want? Do you feel that you did not?
No. I've kind of answered the question, but it's perhaps made it sound easier to do. But it's very much about the people rather than the process involved. Is if you've got somebody that understands the difference between the space sector and the end market, then your life is very easy. Mm-hmm. They can just go, right, okay, that's your space technology. That's a great way of managing power regulation on the solar panel, and I know these solar panel manufacturers and terrestrial markets, and this is their problem, and we can see you've got the technological solution, but we need to figure out how to make this thing work small enough or cheaply enough to fit 4,000 solar panels, not 2. And it's that clarity of thought to focus on the business and the market that you're trying to pursue rather than the technology, which is critical. And that's nothing to do with the space sector. That's the same in all technology areas, but a support infrastructure that keeps asking you, so how are you getting on with your market? How are you getting on with your first customer? Is the sort of questions an investor will ask you but it doesn't necessarily happen in a business incubation program.
Mm-hmm.
The intention is there, but normally they just, are you hitting your milestones? Have you paid for your share of the photocopier? That's fine. The ESA BIC model and other successful models we've seen are much more focused on trying to get an investor on board, and until that investor is on board, asking the questions about where's the business going. Okay, your technology is working, but where's the business going? And keep asking that question, because that helps people who are perhaps not so entrepreneurial to start with really become successful players.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that makes sense, actually. It really does. It makes sense because, but these processes cannot happen without these people. So taking on that perspective of focusing on the people makes more sense than rather focusing on if it's a special process or not, right? Just, I might change it. I'm going to ask my supervisor if I could change that in the guide. Okay. This one. Does the government try to involve companies that have not previously participated in the space business, and how?